The massive warcruiser times Devourer's Fang times drifted through the outer rim of the Kepler system, its dark hull bristling with plasma cannons and void torpedoes. Warlord Krax 9 stood on the command bridge, his 8-foot frame casting an imposing shadow across the tactical displays. His scaled hide bore the ritual scars of 100 conquered worlds, and his 4 eyes glowed with predatory satisfaction as he surveyed the latest intelligence reports. "Commander Vesh, what news from our hunting parties?" Krax 9's voice rumbled like distant thunder through the bridge's filtered atmosphere. The smaller Zephyrian officer approached with nervous energy, his tentacles writhing as he consulted his data pad. "My lord, the raids on the outer colonies proceed as planned. We have captured significant numbers of various species for the slave markets. However, there is one matter that requires your attention." Krax 9 turned his massive head, interest flickering in his predatory gaze. "Speak." The hunting party, led by Captain Thane, encountered resistance on the third planet. A small human settlement, defended by primitive kinetic weapons. The resistance was unexpectedly fierce, but we ultimately prevailed. Captain Thane reported capturing several adult humans and approximately 30 offspring. The warlord's mandibles clicked with approval. "Humans. I have heard whispers of this species. Supposedly resilient workers, though their military capabilities appear limited based on our encounters. What makes them special?" Commander Vesh's tentacles coiled nervously. "Intelligence suggests they bond strongly with their young, my lord. The captured offspring should ensure compliance from any remaining adult population. Captain Thane believes the human parents will prove most cooperative when motivated by their children's welfare." Krax 9 nodded slowly. The hegemony had perfected this strategy across dozens of species. Separate families threatened the young, and even the most stubborn resistance crumbled. It was efficient and psychologically devastating. "Excellent. Have the human offspring transferred to the lower detention blocks. Ensure they remain visible to their parents during processing. Fear is our greatest weapon." As the massive ship continued its journey toward the hegemony's core systems, neither Krax 9 nor his crew were aware of the small communication beacon that had been activated on the human colony just before its fall. The beacon had transmitted a simple message across the vast distances of space, carrying with it coordinates, tactical information, and 3 words that would soon reshape the galaxy's understanding of humanity. They took children. The message traveled through the quantum communication networks that connected human space, reaching military commands, civilian governments, and something far more dangerous, the scattered veterans of humanity's recent wars. These were individuals who had seen the worst of interstellar conflict, who had learned that sometimes civilization's survival required embracing the very darkness it sought to avoid. On the mining station Titan's Rest, former Colonel Sarah Chen received the message while reviewing shipping manifests. Her scarred hands trembled as she read the coordinates and understood the implications. She had lost her own daughter to raiders 5 years ago, never finding trace or closure. The communication room around her seemed to shrink as memories flooded back, memories of promises made to herself about what she would do if she ever found those responsible. Across the sector, similar scenes played out as the message reached others who had suffered similar losses. Captain Marcus Webb, whose entire family had vanished during the Proxima raids. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had seen children burned alive during the siege of New Manila. Sergeant Jim Morrison, whose twin boys had been taken while he was deployed fighting the Keth Confederacy. Each had been broken by their losses. Each had sworn oaths that polite society preferred not to hear. The beacon's message had not been sent through official channels. It bypassed the careful diplomatic protocols that governed human space, avoided the bureaucratic delays that might allow the captured children to disappear forever into the vast slave networks that fed the galaxy's darker markets. Instead, it reached a network that existed in the shadows of human civilization. Individuals bound not by law or military chain of command, but by shared trauma and unbreakable resolve. Within hours, ships began moving across human space, Not the massive dreadnoughts of the human defense force, with their careful rules of engagement and political oversight. These were smaller vessels. Converted freighters with hidden weapon systems. Decommissioned military craft that had somehow avoided the scrapyard. Private ships whose manifests never quite matched their true capabilities. Each carried individuals who had been shaped by loss into something that their own species sometimes feared to acknowledge. Warlord Krax 9 remained unaware of the storm gathering behind him. His attention focused on the profits awaiting from his latest raid. The political advantages that successful slave-taking would bring within the hegemony's complex hierarchy. The human children were simply another asset, valuable only for their ability to control their parents, and eventually serve as workers once properly conditioned. The detention blocks of the Times Devourer's Fang Times hummed with the ship's massive engines as it transported its cargo toward what its crew believed was safety. In those cramped cells, 30 human children huddled together, their young faces marked by terror and confusion. The oldest among them, a girl named Sarah, who had just turned 14, held the smaller ones close and whispered promises that help would come. She had no way of knowing that her words were more prophecy than comfort, or that the help approaching would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Behind the war cruiser, invisible and patient, the hunters began to gather. They moved through hyperspace like ghosts, following the quantum trail left by the massive ship's engines. Each carried weapons that civilized space had banned, knowledge that decent societies tried to forget, and a willingness to embrace methods that would horrify the very children they sought to save. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology, their diplomacy, or their military might. It was their capacity for absolute, terrifying devotion to those they loved, and their willingness to become monsters to protect innocence. The hegemony had made the mistake of taking human children, and now they would face the consequences of awakening something that should have remained sleeping in the dark spaces between the stars. The Times Devourer's Fang Times shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace near the hegemony processing station Tartarus Prime. Warlord Krax 9 stood before the massive view screen, watching the space station's docking bays extend to receive his ship. Tartarus Prime was a monument to the hegemony's efficiency, a sprawling complex of processing facilities, holding areas, and auction houses where captured beings from across the galaxy were sorted, conditioned, and sold to the highest bidders. "Prepare for docking sequence," Commander Vesh announced, his tentacles dancing across the control interfaces. "Lord Krax 9, Administrator Yule 4, has requested immediate transfer of the human cargo. Apparently, there has been significant interest from buyers in the core worlds." Krax 9 nodded approvingly. Quick sales meant better profits and reduced overhead. The human children had been surprisingly quiet during the journey. Too quiet, perhaps, but trauma often manifested in withdrawn behavior among newly captured species. "Very well. Have security teams escort the cargo to Processing Bay 7. Standard protocols." What the Warlord could not see was the small fleet of ships that had been shadowing his vessel since it entered the outer system. 12 craft moved through the asteroid field surrounding Tartarus Prime, their hulls modified with absorption plating that scattered sensor returns. Each ship carried individuals whose names had been erased from official records, whose existence had become a carefully maintained fiction. Sarah Chen floated in the cramped cockpit of her modified cargo hauler, watching the massive space station through enhanced optics. Her fingers traced the controls of weapon systems that hadn't existed when the ship left the factory. Behind her, in the ship's hold, equipment that violated 17 different treaties waited in secured containers. She spoke into her comm system, her voice carrying across encrypted channels to the other hunters. "Primary target is docked at Bay 12. Station defensive systems show standard configuration. Plasma turrets, shield generators, fighter complement of approximately 40 craft. Estimated station population is 12,000. The response came from Captain Marcus Webb, whose ship had taken position near the station's power core. "Copy that, Reaper 7. Sensor sweeps show our target cargo is being moved to the processing levels. Time frame for extraction? Ride. 10 MUA. 10. 10, 10, 10 second. A new voice joined the channel. Dr. Elena Vasquez, speaking from her position near the communications array. I've identified the processing schedule. They're planning to begin conditioning protocols in 6 hours. Once that starts. She didn't need to finish. Everyone on the channel understood what happened to children who entered the hegemony's conditioning programs. Sergeant Jim Morrison's voice cut through the static, cold as vacuum. Rules of engagement are simple. Anything between us and those kids dies. No exceptions. The assault began with precision that would have impressed military strategists across the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez's ship fired a focused electromagnetic pulse that disabled the station's long-range communications, ensuring no calls for help could reach hegemony reinforcements. Simultaneously, Morrison's team launched a coordinated strike on the station's fighter bays, using experimental plasma charges that turned the docked craft into molten slag before pilots could reach them. Alarms screamed across Tartarus Prime as explosions rocked the facility. Administrator Yul 4, a corpulent hegemony bureaucrat whose species had evolved from predatory pack hunters, scrambled to understand what was happening. His communications officer, a nervous Zephyrian, looked up from his console with wide eyes. Administrator, we're under attack. Multiple small craft, unknown configuration. They've disabled our communications and destroyed the fighter wing. Security forces are responding. But these attackers, they're using weapons I don't recognize. Yul 4's mandibles clicked in frustration. Pirates? Rivals seeking to steal our inventory? The communications officer's tentacles writhed with distress. Unknown, sir. But they're moving with purpose. Their first strikes targeted specific systems, communications, fighters, and Administrator. They've breached Processing Bay 7. In the lower levels of Tartarus Prime, Sarah Chen led a 4-person team through corridors that ran red with emergency lighting. Her modified armor shrugged off plasma bolts from station security as she advanced with mechanical precision. Behind her, former military specialists moved with the fluid coordination of individuals who had fought together across multiple war zones. The security team blocking their path fired frantically, their weapons designed for crowd control rather than military engagement. Chen's response was swift and absolute. A weapon that had been banned by 17 civilizations sent a wave of coherent energy that simply erased the obstruction. Where armed guards had stood, only scattered atoms remained. Processing Bay 7 ahead, reported Tom Bradley, a former naval engineer who had lost his son to raiders. His scanner showed thermal signatures that matched human children. 32 life signs, ages approximately 6 to 14. 4 guards. Species unknown. Chen's voice carried no emotion as she keyed her team's frequency. The guards in Processing Bay 7 never had a chance to surrender. They died before understanding what they faced. Their superior numbers meaningless against humans who had embraced the darker arts of war. In the smoke-filled aftermath, Chen's team found the children huddled in holding cells designed to break spirit and will. The 14-year-old girl named Sarah looked up as the armored figures approached. She had been preparing the younger children for whatever horror awaited, trying to be brave even as her own courage wavered. The sight of the approaching figures should have terrified her further. But something in their movement patterns, their body language, spoke of protection rather than threat. "Are you human?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Chen removed her helmet, revealing a scarred face marked by years of conflict and loss. "Yes, we're here to take you home." Throughout Tartarus Prime, similar scenes played out as the rescue teams moved with surgical precision through the station's levels. Each team operated independently, but with perfect coordination. Their movements, guided by intelligence, gathered through methods that civilized societies preferred not to examine too closely. They encountered resistance. The hegemony's security forces were well-trained and heavily armed. But the humans moved through opposition like a natural force, unstoppable and terrifying in their absolute focus. Warlord Krax 9 found himself trapped on his ship as explosions rocked the docking bay. His crew scrambled to undock and escape, But something was wrong with their engines. His engineering officer, a competent Keth who had served loyally for decades, looked up from his console with confusion and growing fear. "My lord, the ship's systems are being infiltrated. Someone has introduced a virus into our core programming. Our weapons are offline, engines are locked, and life support is beginning to fluctuate." Through the view screen, Krax 9 could see the small human ships moving with predatory grace around the space station. One craft approached the Time's Devourer's Fang Times directly, and the Warlord felt something he had not experienced in decades. Genuine fear, not of death, which was always a possibility in his profession, but of the absolute certainty that he faced something beyond his understanding. The human ship attached itself to his vessel's hull like a parasite. Cutting tools that burned hotter than stellar cores began opening passages that his ship's armor could not resist. In the distance, Tartarus Prime burned as explosions continued to rock the massive station. The humans were not looting or conquering in any pattern he recognized. They were systematically destroying everything except the detention areas where captured beings were held. As the cutting beam finished its work and human figures in powered armor entered his ship, Krax 9 understood that his long career as a successful predator had finally ended. The beings approaching him moved with the confidence of apex hunters. And for the first time in his adult life, he was prey. The rescue operation concluded with efficiency that military historians would later study in amazement. 30 human children were extracted from Tartarus Prime, along with hundreds of other captured beings from dozens of species. The space station, which had operated profitably for 3 decades, was reduced to debris that would serve as a navigation hazard for centuries to come. No distress calls had been transmitted. No survivors remained who could identify the attackers or their methods. The human children were transferred to medical ships and began their journey home, while their rescuers faded back into the dark spaces between civilized worlds. The galaxy's underworld whispered about the event for months afterward, adding another entry to growing rumors about what happened when someone threatened human families. The hegemony's investigation would find only questions without answers, destroyed facilities, and evidence of weapons that should not have existed. But in the quiet spaces where parents tucked their children into bed, a new understanding began to spread. That somewhere in the darkness between the stars, guardians watched and waited, ready to embrace any horror necessary to protect innocence. The Hegemony High Command convened in emergency session within the obsidian halls of their primary stronghold, deep in the Nexus core systems. Supreme Overlord Vex Prime, a creature whose species had evolved from parasitic organisms into beings of pure predatory intellect, studied the reports scattered across the holoconference table. Each document told the same impossible story: total destruction of military assets by unknown forces, with surgical precision that defied conventional understanding. Tartarus Prime was not simply attacked, Admiral Keth 9 reported, his cybernetic implants glowing as he processed tactical data. It was systematically dismantled by beings who understood exactly how our systems functioned. They disabled communications first, eliminated our fighter response capability, then extracted specific prisoners, while ensuring no witnesses survived to identify them. General Tox 4, whose armored carapace bore the scars of countless battles, leaned forward with obvious agitation. "The weapons signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Energy patterns that suggest technology beyond our current classification systems. Whatever these beings used, it should not exist according to known physics." Vex Prime's multiple eyes focused on a particular section of the reports. The prisoners they extracted, all human children, plus various other species, held in nearby cells. They showed no interest in the valuable cargo in other sections, ignored weapons, stockpiles, and technology caches. Their sole objective appeared to be rescuing captured young. Intelligence Director Yule 7 activated a holographic display showing the aftermath footage from Tartarus Prime. The massive space station had been reduced to twisted metal and cooling plasma, but the destruction followed specific patterns. Analysis indicates the attackers possessed detailed knowledge of our facility layouts, security protocols, and operational procedures. This suggests either long-term surveillance or access to classified hegemony databases. The room fell silent as implications sank in. The hegemony had built its empire on the assumption that no species could match their military capabilities or infiltrate their security systems. The idea that humans, a species they had dismissed as primitively aggressive but technologically inferior, could accomplish such devastation, challenged everything they understood about galactic power structures. "What do we know about this human species?" Vex Prime demanded. Admiral Keth 9 consulted his data implants. Limited contact until recently. They appear to be a young civilization, approximately 300 years of spaceflight capability. Military encounters suggest they favor kinetic weapons and aggressive tactics. But their technology seemed roughly equivalent to our border patrol vessels. They have never demonstrated capabilities like what we witnessed at Tartarus Prime. General Tox 4's mandibles clicked with frustration. Then we are missing critical intelligence. Species do not develop such advanced warfare capabilities overnight. Either our assessment of human capabilities was fundamentally flawed, or they have hidden resources we failed to detect. The holographic display shifted to show communications intercepts from the past several days. Intelligence Director Yule 7 manipulated the data streams with practiced efficiency. Since the Tartarus Prime incident, we have detected increased activity in human space. Ships moving along routes that do not appear in any official navigation databases. Communications using encryption methods we cannot decode, and energy signatures from vessels that match no known human ship classifications. Vex Prime studied the data with growing unease. As a species that had evolved from parasites, his people understood the importance of remaining hidden until ready to strike. The possibility that humans had been concealing their true capabilities while appearing vulnerable triggered ancestral warnings in his consciousness. "Show me the tactical analysis of their attack methods." The display changed to a three-dimensional representation of Tartarus Prime's destruction. Admiral Keth 9 highlighted specific sections as he explained his findings. The attackers used a combination of electromagnetic warfare, directed energy weapons, and what appears to be matter dissolution technology. Their coordination was perfect, 12 separate craft operating with the precision of a single organism. Most concerning is the evidence of weapons that simply erase matter from existence. Such technology requires understanding of physics that supposedly does not exist. General Tox 4 activated additional displays showing weapon signatures and energy patterns. Our engineers have analyzed the destruction patterns. Whatever these humans used, it operates on principles beyond our current scientific understanding. The targeted matter was not destroyed in any conventional sense. It was simply removed from reality. The implications hung heavy in the chamber's filtered atmosphere. The hegemony's military doctrine relied on superior firepower and technological advantage. If humans possessed weapons that could erase matter itself, traditional defenses became meaningless. Intelligence Director Yule 7 added another disturbing element to their discussion. Communications intercepts suggest this was not an official human military operation. The attackers appeared to be individuals operating outside their government's authority, united by shared purpose rather than military command structure. Vex Prime's multiple eyes widened with realization. You are suggesting these humans were not representing their civilization's military capabilities, but rather acting as independent agents? Precisely, Supreme Overlord. If this represents the capabilities of human civilians operating without official support, we must reassess our understanding of their species entirely. What might their actual military forces be capable of? The chamber fell silent as each member of the High Command contemplated the terrifying possibilities. They had built their empire by accurately assessing the capabilities of potential threats and striking before enemies could organize effective resistance. If their intelligence regarding humans was fundamentally flawed, they faced an unknown quantity that had already demonstrated devastating effectiveness. Admiral Keth 9 brought up additional reports from across hegemony space. There have been other incidents. Slave transport vessels found empty and drifting, their crews missing and cargo liberated. Raiding parties that simply vanished while operating in systems with known human populations. Each incident shows the same pattern. surgical precision, advanced weapons, and complete elimination of witnesses. General Tox 4's carapace clicked as stress patterns manifested in his armored shell. We are dealing with a systematic campaign. These humans are hunting our operations across multiple sectors, targeting specifically those missions that involve capturing sentient beings for the slave trade. Vex Prime processed this information through the paranoid filters that had kept his species alive for millennia. They are not merely rescuing their own young. They are actively hunting us, targeting our most profitable operations while learning our methods and capabilities. This suggests long-term planning and coordination on a scale we failed to detect. Intelligence Director Yule 7 displayed a galactic map showing incident locations. The pattern suggests they have been watching us far longer than we realized. Each strike targeted operations at their most vulnerable moments, using detailed knowledge of our procedures and timing. This level of intelligence gathering requires sophisticated networks and advanced surveillance capabilities. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Chamber's security coordinator. Emergency protocols activated as reports flooded in from hegemony facilities across the galaxy. Transport fleets found empty and drifting. Military installations discovered offline with personnel simply vanished. Supply convoys intercepted, and their human cargo liberated by unknown forces. They are striking simultaneously across multiple sectors, Admiral Keth 9 reported, his implants processing incoming data streams. Coordinated attacks on 17 different operations, all targeting facilities involved in human acquisition or transport. The scale of coordination required suggests capabilities far beyond what we believed possible. Vex Prime realized they faced something unprecedented in hegemony history. A species that had been watching and learning while appearing vulnerable, developing capabilities in secret while allowing their enemies to underestimate them. The humans had not simply rescued their captured children. They had declared war on the entire concept of threatening human families. The Chamber's displays showed the scope of the campaign unfolding across hegemony space. Each attack followed the same pattern. Overwhelming force, applied with surgical precision, complete elimination of opposition, and liberation of captured humans, along with other species held in the same facilities. No demands were made, no communications attempted. The humans were not seeking negotiation or surrender. They were systematically dismantling every operation that had ever threatened their young. General Tox 4 voiced what each member of the High Command was beginning to understand. This is not a rescue operation or a punitive expedition. They are teaching us that threatening human offspring triggers a response that cannot be deterred, reasoned with, or defeated through conventional means. They are reshaping the galactic understanding of consequences. As reports continued to flood in from across their empire, the hegemony leadership began to grasp the scope of their miscalculation. They had seized human children believing it would ensure compliance and profit. Instead, they had awakened something that moved through space, like a force of nature, systematic and implacable in its purpose. The humans were demonstrating to the galaxy that some lines could not be crossed without facing consequences that transcended normal concepts of warfare or diplomacy. They were teaching a lesson that would be remembered for generations, that threatening the innocent would result in facing the absolute worst that humanity could become, wielded with the precision and dedication that only love could inspire. The age of underestimating humanity had ended in the cold vacuum around Tartarus Prime, and the galaxy would never be the same.